This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rangers through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicoladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
We want to win. It's Seattle Sounders, bro.
Porque say cheated.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Car wrote a commentary that we didn't take the Open Cup seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes. Joining me today on the podcast is someone I'm really excited to have on. First time we've had him on. Sacha Kljestan. You probably know him from Apple TV's MLS Studio, or you might know him from his 13 seasons playing in MLS. He had 44 goals, 99 assists. He played for Chivas USA, the New York Red Bulls, Orlando City, and LA Galaxy. But I've really enjoyed, especially watching him make the transition into the studio and becoming one of the really entertaining and insightful voices covering this league. So welcome to the show, Sacha, and thank you for doing this. I know you're on vacation, and I don't take it lightly that you're making time.
No, I appreciate it anytime. Yeah. Surprising. This is my first appearance on the podcast. I've been making my rounds over the past couple of years, but excited to talk Sounders and LA Galaxy.
Yeah, well, anytime you want to get back on, we're happy to have you.
Thanks, man.
But yeah, so anyway, we'll start with this. You played for 3 of the teams that are still alive in the playoffs, so I assume that means that you're going to be rooting for the Sounders just because of fairness, right?
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I don't have a dog in the fight in any of these ones. I think all are really good stories when you look at the 4 clubs that are left. Seattle, possible to get back to their first final in a few years. Obviously, Galaxy. It's been 10 years since they've been to an MLS Cup, and they've obviously been the most successful team in MLS history. And then you got the 2 teams in the East. Orlando, obviously never been to an MLS Cup. Red Bull's one of the few originals left that have not won an MLS Cup. So, and then I feel like I'm like the good luck Chuck. As soon as I leave your club a few years later, you're in the Final Four. So, it's going to be an exciting weekend.
Yeah, so you are currently, or you are at heart, you're a Southern California guy. You came up through the youth ranks there. You played there at 2 different times. You live there now. Who, in your mind, who's currently winning the battle for hearts and minds between the Galaxy and LAFC? It at least seems like the mood has started to change a little bit this year.
Well, I think what we see from the LA Galaxy this year is just that everybody's excited about the club again, and that the fans have something to believe in, as they should. They've been the most entertaining team in the league this year. So when you show up to that stadium, I think you're entertained. 2, you get to see beautiful attacking soccer, and 3, they're winning, which is the most important thing. So they're ticking all the boxes right now. However, LAFC in the past 7 years, since they've arrived in MLS, they have been the most successful team over the past 7 years. That's for sure. And that's on and off the field. They've done a very good job of branding. A lot of times around Southern California, you see people just wearing that black and gold LAFC hat, which has become a bit of a style icon thing in Los Angeles. So it's been a great battle now this year to see the LA Galaxy kind of back where they belong in the upper echelons of Major League Soccer.
Yeah, I was down there last weekend for the game, And I was blown away, frankly, at especially once you get to the stadium. I mean, everybody is wearing black and gold. It's not,
Yeah.
you go to a lot of games. I mean, even you go to Sounders games, you obviously you see a fair amount of Rave Green, but it's not like everybody is wearing it. Almost everyone walking into that stadium was wearing black and gold, and just demographically, it is so diverse. It looks exactly like how you imagine an MLS game should look. You have these supporters, loud supporters in one end, and you have you just have a variety of different kinds of people at the game.
Yeah.
I thought they did a really good job of, like, I took a walk around the concourse. They did a really good job of activating it. There's concessions and pro shops everywhere, like basically every 20 feet. I haven't been able to get out to Dignity Health Sports Park ever. I was hoping to get down there this weekend. It does not look like that's going to happen. As you may have heard, this is a very busy travel weekend.
So, yeah.
So it ended up being a little out of my budget, I think, to get down there. Also, obviously I have stuff to do otherwise. But anyway, what is the atmosphere like at Galaxy games? It's these, I saw the Minnesota game on TV, and it seemed like it is as boisterous as ever.
Yeah, listen, I think the Galaxy fans feel that they're back, which I think they are. If you just look at their home record this year, right? I think they played now 18 games or 19 games in Major League Soccer. They've got 3 draws, and the rest of them are wins. Their one home loss, quote unquote, this year was the game at the Rose Bowl. So when you show up to that stadium, it is loud again. It is packed. I think a lot of the fans are trying to wear white to create this, whiteout event in there that I think looks really cool. They're loud, they're excited, they're behind their team. And like I mentioned earlier, they play beautiful attacking soccer. So that's always fun to cheer for. And you have to give some credit, a lot of credit to the fans, because they were the ones that changed things around in this club. What it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when they walked out and they demanded changes from the club. And you had a couple of changes in the front office. And then they went out and they spent $20 million on 2 very good wingers this offseason who have added a clear new dynamic to this team. So it just seems like there's a ton of excitement around the Galaxy. The stadium is a place that it seemed like it was 10 years ago, in the days of Landon Donovan and David Beckham and Robbie Keane, when most teams stepped into that stadium, they were hoping for a draw, but knowing they were probably going to lose. And so that's what it seems like it is again right now for the Galaxy.
And I don't know, how would you articulate, as someone who was there during sort of the end of the previous era, or towards the end of the previous era, how different is the mood around the team right now? And it is as simple as this change in leadership in the front office.
Well, I think it's making it even more simpler than that, is that winning cures a lot of things, and winning makes everybody happy. So that's kind of the first thing, but then you have to backtrack and just say, listen, Will Kuntz has done a good job, I think, of just creating a little bit more structure in that club. And I know it very well, because my brother Gordon works right under Will Kuntz, and helps manage the salary cap and things like that. So I know what's going on in that club. I've been around it. It did not have a family feel before. I'm not sure it has the total family feel now, but it's in a much better place than it was a few years ago. Just, I think, with better lines of communication between the club and the fans, and the club and the players. And then you can see it on the field. Obviously, the players are happy. They enjoy what they're doing right now, and the club just seems like it's in a much better place.
So this team is, like you said, it's a ton of fun to watch. They've already scored 15 goals in the first 5 games. I guess they're 2 goals shy of tying
First 3 games.
Sorry.
3
yeah,
games.
What are
Yeah.
yeah. They've scored at least 4 in every game, right?
Yes, they've scored 4, 5, and 6, and the MLS playoff record for goals in a postseason is 17, which was set by Toronto. So they've done it in 3 games. Listen, their attack has been amazing. Gabriel Peck and Ricky Pooch are the 2 players that get the most plaudits. But when you have Dejan Joveljic, who's a killer in the box, and Joseph Paintel, who's got great movement off the ball, and now you add in Marco Royce when you're playing against a team that's sitting in a low block, they've been pretty fun to watch and pretty entertaining.
Well, let's get into that a little bit. What is, Ricky Pooch is sort of the player who, it feels like he's getting a lot of the credit for this change, but he also was, he was here last year when they weren't quite, or the last couple of years when they weren't quite as dynamic. Is it as simple as spending $20 million on wingers and sort of the collective just raising, or is there something that they're doing tactically that is really different?
No, I don't think tactically things have changed. I played under Greg Vanney and it looked the same to me. It's just when he sets up his team and you're setting up in a 4-3-3 and you're in ball possession and you're trying to get into the half spaces, wingers are so important. You have to have wingers in that system who either run behind and make good runs and can finish off plays, or wingers that can dribble past players, right? And so when we look back on the years when I was there, we didn't have those wingers. Now you spend, about $20 million on Gabriel Peck, who's the newcomer of the year, one of the best wingers in the league. Joseph Paintsville, obviously, a 10-goal, 10-assist type guy. That creates a world of difference because before, I think last season, teams were able to just hone in on Ricky Pooch and try to take him out of the game. And there wasn't space for him to operate because no players were running in behind. There was no threat in behind. There was no threat from the wingers. And so now you add in these wingers, and because they're so good, they allow Ricky Pooch more space to operate. And then, listen, in a playoff game against Minnesota, he's getting 161 touches. That's absurd. He's able to just control and dictate the entire game, and he's been one of the best in the league this year.
Yeah, it's unreal. I think I saw somewhere today that he had 144 passes, which is has to be up there with like an MLS record. I don't know. It's hard for me to you don't hear about 100 pass games that often, let alone 44% more than that.
And he's getting minimum 100 touches every single game because he just has the energy to buzz about and get on the ball, and he's brave and he's fearless. He's really a special player to watch.
But on the other side, they do have some holes defensively. Against Minnesota, they gave up 2 goals. They did sometimes they were allowing chances, I guess is a way of putting it.
Yeah,
it's sort of been a thing, maybe not so much in the playoffs, but during the year. Where can they be exploited? What are their weaknesses that if you're game planning against them that you're looking to exploit?
Well, I think Seattle specifically, you're looking for turnovers in the midfield. You're looking for when Ricky Pooch drops basically when the Galaxy is in possession and they start to spread themselves a bit. If you can turn them over in the midfield, then it's 1 or 2 passes and you have a quick counterattack going. That's number one, which is what Seattle tried to do against LAFC, and they did it well. They stifled them, and they were able to a few times to try to get on the break. And then the second one is set pieces. If I'm Seattle, I'm looking at set pieces, corner kicks as an opportunity to score every single time. John McCarthy, the goalkeeper, he's had a pretty good season, but he's not spectacular. And so I think those are the 2 ways. When Galaxy is in possession, turnover, first pass forward, can you start breaking lines and start going to goal? That's how Minnesota scored their first goal, was, picking the ball off of Ricky Pooch 35 yards from his own goal and 2 passes forward right back to Yeboah, and he finishes it. And then set pieces. I think the Galaxy got better at set piece defending as the season went on. At the beginning of the season, it was a really difficult spot for them, but they got better. But it's still a part where I think Seattle can exploit with those big center backs coming in the box.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, the Sounders scored 2 goals off set pieces in the Leagues Cup meeting. They won that game 3-1. In fact, I think you can argue the Sounders outplayed the Galaxy in all 3 of their meetings this year. The first one, but they all had sort of caveats attached to them. The first one, the Galaxy, I think the Galaxy were missing a couple players in at least a couple of those games. But the first one was played in a pretty torrential downpour. Galaxy got an early goal and then sort of held on from there. The second one was 0-0 at Lumen Field, but it was pretty much it was a pretty Sounders heavy chance-wise in that game. And then, of course, there was this 3-1 Leagues Cup game. Is there much, though, to take away from those games, or is there much even to take away from, Greg Vanney is just 10, I think it's 10 or 4, 10, and 3 against Brian Schmetzer. Are these things that we should be looking at, like the historic records, even going, from a few months ago?
Not really. I think at this point in the season, both teams are at different places than they were back in August when they played in the Leagues Cup. I think Seattle was really rounding into form then. That kind of started their good form in the second half of the season. But Seattle, I've always said, is a team that's built for the playoffs because they don't make mistakes. They don't usually shoot themselves in the foot, and they're so solid defensively, which is just always a recipe for success in the postseason. So you've got, it's probably the best defense in the league against the best attack in the league at this point. So what's going to bend, what's going to break is going to be the question. But I don't think you need to look back on those games. At the Leagues Cup one, Seattle was up 2-0 within 7 minutes, right off of set pieces. Like you had said, the first one, Gabriel Peck scores in like the 4th or 5th minute of that game. Yep. So early goals always change things, that's for sure. I expect this one to be a little bit more cagey.
And so, Greg Vanney has played Brian Schmetzer more than any other coach during his MLS career, or he has faced him more times than anyone else during his coaching career. That includes 3 MLS Cup meetings. And Brian Schmetzer has actually gotten the best of them for the most part.
Yeah.
You obviously played for Greg Vanney. Does he approach the Sounders or facing Brian Schmetzer any differently than any other team? Like, is there this sort of bogey team atmosphere around it, or is that something that doesn't really get into the locker room?
I don't think that got into the locker room, but Greg always seems to try to come up with a little tinker of a game plan, just depending on how the other team usually sets up tactically. So it will be interesting to see how the Galaxy come out. I don't think much changes for the Galaxy, to be honest, whether Seattle plays in a back 5 or a back 4. But I will be interested to see how Seattle lines up tactically and just how healthy they are for this game, because I know they've got a couple of injuries. And if, Nuhu is back, do they go back to a back 4, or does he play in a back 5 again? That will be interesting to see. But I do expect Seattle to play a little bit lower and on the counterattack. But I don't think that Greg Vanney is thinking or overthinking things against Brian Schmetzer. I do think Schmetzer is a very smart coach who always kind of comes up with a good game plan, especially in the playoff, and gets his players to stick to that game plan.
Well, let's get into the Sounders side of this a little bit. Against Minnesota, they seem to try to sit deep and they had 5 in the back, and that's sort of been how they've been playing. It didn't work out too well for them, obviously. If you were Brian Schmetzer, how do you go about balancing the knowledge that this is a team that is very explosive and can, beat you up pretty badly if you let them, but at the same time, you have to keep them honest?
Yeah, listen, I think it's the same game plan as when you played LAFC. But then this time you have to expect that Galaxy will have even more possession than LAFC did in that conference semifinal matchup. You don't want to give space to Peck and Paintsill to run into, in my opinion, or space for them to pick up the ball and start driving at your back line with a lot of momentum. When you see how Peck scored his first goal and how he scored his second goal, it's just too much space. And that's where LAFC looks first plays. They want Denny Bouanga to get the ball with time and space and lots of space to run into. And Seattle never gave him that. So they really limited him in that match. I think they have to have that same game plan against Gabriel Peck and Joseph Paintsill specifically.
And offensively, you would think that the Sounders are going to look to get Jordan into space, either whether he's on the wing or starting up top. From what you've seen of him this year, has he shown you as a pundit that he is a number 9, or do you still think there's an open question as to his best position and how the Sounders sort of build around him?
I still think the Sounders at their best, not this season. Right now, he is the best number 9 on the team, but the Sounders at their best, in my opinion, would be with Jordan Morris back on the left wing and a real good number 9 up front, like Rui Diaz was years ago. I think Rui Diaz is past his prime. And so in the moment, Jordan Morris is playing well as the 9, but he's not ruthless enough for me to be a starting number 9 week in and week out. Now, listen, he's done his job. He's scored goals. He's put it in the back of the net. I think against LAFC, Aaron Long had him in his pocket for 120 minutes. And on one set piece, he got his chance and he absolutely buried it. And that was a really fantastic striker's goal. So maybe he's making me eat my words, but I do think he's best when he's coming in off the left and having more space to run into.
Well, and this is a game where the Sounders are potentially without, they're definitely without Paul Rothrock. They're potentially without Yamar, Nuhu, even Reed Baker Whiting, who started as a left wing back last game. If you're game planning for, if you're approaching this game, are you tempted to bring Rui Diaz back in and move Morris out to the wing just because of all these absences, or is there some other approach that you would like to, like, I guess it's maybe between João Paulo and Raul Rui Diaz as who you're going to bring into the lineup?
Yeah, probably not bringing Rui Diaz in as a starting player. I think I'd keep Jordan Morris up front for now. I think Yamar is the biggest miss if he can't play. I think Nathan came in and did well against the Galaxy, but from what I remember about playing against him in the San Jose days, there's a clear drop-off between Yamar and Nathan. Yeah. So the biggest question marks will be back there. I think whether you bring João Paulo in, that just adds to the team, to the organization. I think Obed Vargas against LAFC was fantastic. He's been one of the best young players in the league this year. You always know what you're going to get out of Christian Roldan and Alex Roldan for that matter. So I think I would try to keep the midfield solid, keep it the same way it's been. You got to get Rusnak on the ball in between the lines, and you got to get Jordan Morris on the run behind that back line, because that's where the Galaxy can be exposed.
And so in sort of, if I'm projecting out what you're suggesting, you wouldn't mind seeing Christian probably moved out to the right and let Obed and JP man the center of the midfield.
Yes, because I think that makes sense for what's happening with Seattle right now. I think just the sheer running you get out of Christian Roldan, and he's shown the propensity to score goals against the Galaxy in the past, especially on counterattacks in that stadium. And he has the engine and the motor. I know he didn't score a lot this year, but he still can be really lethal in the counterattack just by his volume of running.
Yeah, and I mean I've been pretty impressed by his move to the number 6. I was for a long time someone who thought that move that was not the best use of his talents, but it has worked pretty well this year when they've moved him back there. But I am starting to think you're right about if you're balancing your needs in this game, moving him onto the right is probably the best option that you have, and bringing JP in rather than Rui Diaz. But I don't know. That's the biggest one that I'm curious to see what they end up doing there. And then I guess on the other side, do you think, what's your projection in terms of, is this a game that Marco Royce gets a start, or is this something where they go to a more two-way sort of look there?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question, is whether Marco Royce starts or Mark Delgado starts. Delgado gives you more balance, a little bit more defensive structure, more running defensively. But I think Greg Vanney will lean towards starting Marco Royce again, just to add that, other number 10/8 to play in between the lines, especially because I think the Galaxy will have more possession, and that just kind of adds another number into the attack. So I'm eagerly awaiting to find out the starting lineups on Saturday night, just to see how I think both teams will line up. But my gut tells me Marco Royce starts.
And so my understanding is this is going to be a little bit different of a game for you. You're going to be on the sideline. I guess that's something you did last week against for the Hudson River Derby as well.
Yes, I will be on the sideline. Just doing some pregame hits with the studio crew back, for the MLS pregame show for both games. And then, grabbing interviews and talking to coaches. And it's always fun being on the sideline for these games, because you get to see the action up close. And, being in the studio every weekend, you start to miss the atmosphere of a game and the crowd and all that. So I'm really looking forward to this one, because I think it's really going to be a fantastic game on Saturday night.
So I'm going to just ask you this. So you you made some predictions for this last game. You went 1 for 4 on those predictions. Not trying to. It was a hard one to predict. I'm not trying to light you up. But what was the thing that most surprised you, I guess, from last round? And what are the, we have two matchups that on paper, I think, well, I don't know, maybe they're not as lopsided as I'm suggesting. But what are you expecting out of this round collectively? And what was the biggest surprise you had from last round?
I think the biggest surprise was that Atlanta laid an egg. I think they had so much momentum, and listen, we have to remember they were the 9 seed, so they are what they are. But I think we all got caught up in the hype, or at least I got caught up in the hype of how well they played against Miami. So I thought Orlando was very good. They controlled the game in its entirety. Atlanta never really threatened. So it's good to see Orlando win because they were the better team for sure. Going into this round, I expect 2 really tight games. I don't expect high scoring in either of them. If I had to give an edge, I'd give an edge to the Galaxy just because they've played at home so unbelievably well this season, but in a very, very tight one. And then in the Eastern Conference final, I think the Red Bulls have some mojo right now. But I do think Orlando is the better team. They defend better. They control the game better. Look, Red Bull scored 2 kind of opportunistic goals against New York City, and then New York City kind of battered them with kind of chance after chance and just never really took their chances. So I do think Orlando will take their chances a little bit better, and I'll pick them to win in the East also.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time here, Sacha. It's been really a pleasure talking to you. Again, I would urge everyone to check out the studio bits of MLS Season Pass, if for no other reason than Sacha and Bradley Wright Phillips have some good banter, and it's a good watch. So thanks for doing this, Sacha. It's really appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, come join us, MLS Countdown, MLS 360. I mean, obviously not anymore, but next season, we have a great time in the studio. Like you said, we have great banter, and just we all enjoy watching the games together and try to bring it to life. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and hopefully we see you out in Seattle in a week or so.
All right. Good luck to the Sounders. It's going to be a good one.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
All right. This is No Study Yet This, and yeah, we'll catch you next time.
We love you. Let's win another one!